I think Gabon's coup has been a long time coming, because if you go back to 2016, when we had the elections, when Ali Bongo was running for a second term, that election was marred with accusation of fraud, and the aspersions actually played out in the streets because people went on to protest. They even touched part of the parliament. Some people were killed, and but he was able to maintain his grip on power. Then you go in 2018, he fell sick. He was in Morocco for several months. In 2019, there was a coup attempt in January, and that coup attempt was thwarted. If you listen to, if you go back to the statement made by the plotters at the time, they cited the 2016 election as being illegitimate and, of course, the long-term rule of the Bongo family. So fast forward to 2023, we saw another election, again, with several aspersions of fraud. Reporters Without Borders said foreign journalists were not allowed to cover the elections. Immediately after the elections, Ali Bongo was announced winner with about 65% of the votes. But if you notice, there were no celebrations. And then you had the coup hours later, and then there were celebrations. So if people are not celebrating an election result, but they're celebrating a coup, you didn't really have an election. And when Bongo spoke for the first time with video, he was speaking in English, talking to the rest of the world to come to support. If he did have 65% of the vote of Gabonese, he will be speaking to his supporters to come to the street to defend their mandate. So I think the political process is the underlying issue, the broken political process rather, the underlying issue that drove the coup that we saw recently.
On the question of sincerity, it's difficult. Military coups are military coups. They're nothing less, nothing short of anything else, unfortunately. But in some cases, they seem to be welcomed, as has been suggested, more than election outcomes. In terms of the timetable, I think it's a balance reasonably struck. Because anything longer than that, I think both the Gabonese people, observers like ourselves, in particular African observers like ourselves, and indeed friends, the international community, would possibly be saying that they're stretching deliberately. I think they're trying to show that they really mean well for Gabon, and it was not anything else except the grievances that they present. But you know, military guys will present grievances anyway. Idi Amin in our own native Uganda had a cheeky list of grievances, but of course he had overthrown the most elected and, if like, the most progressive government in the history of our country. So it's neither here nor there. I think from their perspective, things had really started to change, particularly the Bongo son, who's just been deposed. Around his first term, the tone, the language, the attempts that he actually tried to make in reforms in Gabon were possibly not particularly bad, notwithstanding the fact that he was a continuation of a dynasty. So structurally, it's possible for that to happen. I can also use another example. After we had gotten rid of Idi Amin in Uganda, elections were held within 18-month period, and it was held successfully, although the opposition cried foul. But so, you know, except for the constitutional making process, and it depends on really how you want to do it, it is actually possible. Quite clearly, again, Gabon is a small country, relatively small country, fairly rich. People are generally very tired of this one family thing. If they're able to mobilize goodwill from within Gabon, and if they're able to coalesce amongst themselves, and I think the important thing they did was to say that the former president was free to leave, and I've been watching very closely how they're going to be treating these guys thus far. It hasn't happened that very bad. From that point of view, actually, there's no reason why they don't come together, rally, and make sure that, Gabon moves into a new phase. It's a tiny little country, relatively rich, as you said in your introduction. It's a country that, if well governed, like most other African countries, cry, it is possible for them to have a huge future. A future, of course, without excess external influences, that is London, Paris, and others can keep calm a little bit.